Greetings Internet, welcome to Aaron Plays, and I hope you're doing fantastically well. In this video, if you looked at the thumbnail and the title, I'm going to discuss 3 games: Ambush, Upfront and Warfighter. Why these 3 games? Well, they're all at the same scale. They all deal with man-to-man conflict in World War II, just in different ways. Now, yes, I know Warfighter has a modern iteration, but we're going to be discussing. I don't have the modern iteration, I only have the World War II version. So I'm going to be discussing those 3 games. They're on a par with each other. 2 games from the 80s, Ambush and Upfront, and one from the 2015-ish, 14 maybe, which is Warfighter. I'm going to discuss what's the difference between the 3, what I like about them, what I dislike about them, and how they can sort of compare with each other, and which of the 3 is my favourite. Now, so the first game I actually owned of any of these 3 was Upfront. I got that in the 80s. While I was still in South Africa. Didn't play it much there. There was not many, as I mentioned in my South African US video. I didn't have that many opponents to play, but I never really got beyond scenario A of Upfront. It was teach someone how to play, played a couple of times, and then that was about it really. So played. Now, in the original Upfront, which is what I only had in South Africa, you had the Germans, the Americans, and the Russians. So scenario A got played Germans v Russians, Russians v Americans. Yes, did Russians v Americans as well, and such forth. But didn't really go much. Well, didn't go beyond that at all. But upon my return from South Africa, I did play it a bit more, and even got to as far as scenario C. So scenario A was called Meeting of Patrols. It had and yeah, it's ostensibly a 2-player game. And scenario A, so Meeting Patrols. Scenario B was a city fight, and scenario C was an attack of a fortification. All infantry base. Each player had a squad. Depending on the nationality, the German squad was generally 10 men, the Russian squad was 14, 15 men, and the American squad was 12 men. And various iterations, different men. So a city fight, there was guys with more submachine guns. The attack and fortification, you had introduced things like demo charges and flamethrowers. There was a program instructions of the rules. You introduce various rules. I mean, the initial to play scenario A was a big chunk of probably about 50% of the rules, and then from then on it was introducing various extra paragraphs. Around about this, when I came back from South Africa, I started hearing about a game called Ambush, which did it as a solitaire game. Now, Upfront isn't designed as a solitaire game, but when you actually bought the Japanese expansion for it, there was a way to play the game solo, but I had enough people to play it with that I didn't actually delve into the solo aspect of it at all. I'd start hearing again now about Ambush, and when I went to a place called Leisure Games up in Finchley in London, that's where I bought Banzai, which was the Japanese expansion for Upfront. I did see on the shelf Ambush, and at that point I wished I bought it. Well, let's just say at a future point I wish I bought it, because I didn't. I bought Banzai, and I bought the Desert expansion, which was like a little for Upfront, because Upfront was a game that I was currently enjoying playing, and still to this day I enjoy playing. Ambush at the time, as I say, we're talking probably 80, well, probably now 1990 ish, and that's when I saw it. And I wish I'd bought it retrospectively, probably about a couple of years later, when I, saw there was different gamuts for it and such forth, but I didn't. So, and then I didn't play up front for quite a few years. I didn't really actually get back into up front till about 2014, where via the joys of the internet, I had started playing a guy from Texas. And I know he's a subscriber to the channel. I don't know how he watches the videos, but I will mention, I'll drop name him, a guy called Randy from Texas. And we started playing up front. And yeah, we actually went through through the rules and such forth, beyond scenario C, and eventually even started bringing in tanks. I was also at this time playing up front with my daughter. She was thoroughly enjoying it. We played, some of the Japanese scenarios and such forth. So up front was getting plenty of play, 2-player. Okay, so again, I didn't touch on the solo aspect of it at that time. Around about maybe a year later, I tried a game called Frontline. I think it was Frontline. Didn't like it at all. In actual, no, slightly wide. It's because I bought Frontline that I bought out the up front. That's right. Try this one. I think that was a DVG game, and no, didn't like it at all. I thought, if this is meant to be the update from up front, let me get the up front out, and I got the up front out, and we started playing that in there. Boom, blew that game away. And to this day, I'm still playing up front. So why is that in here with Warfighter and Ambush? Well, let's bring Warfighter into the mix. So that was around about 2016 or 17. I picked up Warfighter. I saw it advertised, saying that it had again Russians, Germans, and Americans in the box, and various squads and such forth. And you could pick up additional cards for different nationalities, these little decks. So, and it played solo and multiplayer, not just 2-player, multiplayer. So I thought that sounds interesting. So now I didn't kickstart it. I bought it off the shelf, and I ordered some bits from DVG. I've got like the neoprene mat, and then so when it finally arrived, I started playing a little bit. I played it solo, and my first thoughts were, yeah, it's all right. It didn't blow me away like up front, but it played okay. So I thought, all right, so let's try multiplayer. I took it down to the gaming club I was at the time, and I played it 4-player, 2 per side. No, it wasn't 2 per side. No, you don't play it. You play against. That's right. We played four of us as a team against the AI. It's not you're always got an AI side. You don't have 2 players for 2 players. Nothing. So we played it 4-player against the AI, and again, it always struck me as, yeah, it's okay. You had X amount of purchase points. With those purchase points, you bought a team, because you never got a full squad. And that was one of the things I didn't like. You got, depending on the scenario, the mission and the objective and such forth, you got X amount of points to spend on your team. Now, one of normally your team leader costs you sometimes nearly half your points. And then you've got a few other guys, and then you've got some dribs and drabs. So you normally ended up with about 5, maybe 6 guys. So it never felt like a full squad. So even if you were playing it with just 2 of you, you then sort of got close to a squad with your 2 teams. We'll take out the AI. The other thing I started to find is that even the missions were different, with whatever missions you had, they start to feel a bit samey. You went through you were sort of progressing along a track that was at the bottom. You had to go from terrain type to terrain type. You had to deal with certain cards. You had certain cards in your hand, which you had to deal and move things forward. But they started to feel a bit samey, which I can definitely not say occurred with Up Front. True, you were playing two-player, you were playing against each other, and you could be doing scenario A, and you could just be doing Germans v Americans, or Germans versus Russians, or Japanese versus whichever two nationalities. You could play 10 scenarios of just scenario A, and they never felt the same, ever. It was always tense. It was always, yes, there were lulls as you were building up your deckhand and such forth, and suddenly bam, 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 explosion. And you did this, that. They had enough defensive cards. It was always exciting. I've never played a game of Up Front that went meh, but I played quite a few games of Warfighter that went meh. That was okay. There was never a game that was like, oh, that was shite, but there was quite a lot of meh. And that was, so I tried buying some of the expansion boxes. I bought the British, the German expansion, the American expansion for the cards that were already in the box. And when adding these cards, it did add a few more options. But at the end of the day, these little boxes of cards were quite expensive. I mean, the base game, and we're talking Britain, was about £40–45. Each of these boxes was £11 to £15, depending where you bought them, and some places had sales on. But even at £11 each, you buy 4 of those, you bought another game. And I started to feel a bit ripped off. I thought, well, the base game hasn't got that much to it, and I'm buying these other boxes, and I think in the end I bought about maybe 10, because I bought the British expansion box, a weapons box, and different mission boxes. But again, the missions all felt about, they were different. You had different things to do, but you had to sort of proceed in the same way. Build up enough cards to allow you to move across the terrain type. The enemy came in and tried to stifle you and choke you off at that particular point. And I just felt, yeah. And to be fair, I haven't played it since probably about 2019. Yeah. So, but we haven't finished with the Warfighter and Up Front. So, I then, quite recently, 2021, I managed to pick up Ambush, and I've mentioned this in my review of Ambush, and my subsequent playings of it on my channel, that this was a game that I had been keeping track of. I kept on looking on eBay, I can't find a copy, and it's too expensive and such forth. And then I think it was on Facebook. Was it Facebook? I think it was Facebook. Someone had put up that they had Ambush plus its 3 gamuts. Was it Purple Heart, Moving Out, Silver something or other? Anyway, plus Battle Hymn, plus the tank one. I can't remember what that was called now. For about £150. Which, in retrospect, in considering Moving Out itself was about £70 on eBay. I thought, yeah, and I think the other was up for less than an hour, and I said, I'll have it, I'll get it. Take my money, and it arrived, and I pretty much had it out, and I was clipping it wasn't. Well, the base game was punched. The other ones were not. So I started clipping the counters for up front for Ambush, and started pushing them around and learning the rules, getting the rules completely wrong, especially around about activation. But I then put it onto the channel and started playing around with it there, and have been totally impressed by it ever since. Now, so what's the difference in between the way the three games present themselves? So there's only one that actually has a map or map sheet, and that is Ambush, where each of the guys is represented by a counter and your roster, and you move around the map, and each hex you enter, you check to see if there's a paragraph that relates to that hex, and then read that and then do various things from there. Now, as I said, up front is a pure card game. You're playing, your squad is, each chap is represented by a card which has his stats on it, and your opponent's got the same. You split your squad into groups or areas that they affect, and each of your or teams, which might be a better way of looking at it, you split them into teams and they do various actions that you play cards on. So you can get them to move, you can get them to fire, you can get them to dig in, you can, and such forth. And if you start playing with vehicles, you get a vehicle card, and it can move and fire and shoot. And you've got mortars, and you've got off-board artillery, and so on. Warfighter, it uses a board, which is generic, and you play terrain cards on that board. Now, going back to up front, you also play terrain cards. So you play a move card, then you place yourself into terrain, which is a lot of people saying, well, that means, and then you move out of that terrain, you can't go back to that terrain. How does that sort of fit? Well, considering terrain itself doesn't move, it's the squad moving. If they return back to a forest, you've got to play another forest card. That forest isn't there until you play the forest card. And a lot of people sort of say, well, isn't that not realistic? And I'm sort of saying, well, maybe, but when you cross over a rise, you get shot at, you lose track of where that forest was until you play the forest card, or you've got a forest card, and so on. So with Warfighter, you're playing terrain cards and you move beyond that, but the terrain card from memory stays there. But you never need to go back. You're always going forward to try to get to the objective. You never, well, was there a mission where you had to go back? I can't remember, but it was always generally going forward onto the next terrain card and to get to your objective. Whereas up front you had the victory conditions was normally moving forward towards the enemy, or sometimes if you were trying to retreat, you had there were retreating missions, and you had to get into close to the enemy and normally into some terrain. Or the other way of winning was to actually cut the enemy squad to below half strength. That was a way of winning too. Ambush, you normally had a victory condition, but there was no set amount of turns to play. There was never I've got to complete this within 10 turns. Now, obviously, a lot of games do have the victory time limit as your driving force. So there's no driving imperative to finish the game in Ambush. With up front, you normally had X amount of decks to go through. So you had to complete the deck of cards was, I think it was 160 odd cards. Once that deck's been completed, you reshuffled them and then you went through them again and again. Normally it was 3 times through the deck, and then you determine victory. Warfighter, I'm trying to remember. It was dependent on getting to the mission card, the objective card, in a set time limit. So of the 3, Ambush was the only one that didn't have a set time. Its victory conditions were worded in such a way, once, and you went through, I've got to explain it. Right, there's various conditions. It's like the script of a movie or something like that. You went through conditions 1 normally to 4, sometimes to 6. Treat them as an act might be a better way to do it. So an act 1 in the movie, this happens, and once something happens, it triggers, you move to act 2, and so on. So you might be having, the objective might be to go and scout out a hill and find the enemy. Okay, Act 1 is where you're sort of creeping around, and then you find a mine or something in a building that triggers Act 2, where you then change this condition card, and each of those hexes that you might have gone through before or starting to approach, something different, it might send you to a different paragraph, or something else might happen. And then something else will trigger then Act 3. So a lot of the victory conditions will be set on when you go to condition or Act 3 or 4. It might say, once this scenario cannot end until you're in condition 4 and you have achieved X, Y, and Z. It might be occupying a building or a ridge on a hill, but you've got no incentive or nothing pushing you to do that quicker. So where was I? So yeah, there's no set or anything driving you to finish, other than the enemy, as the conditions increase, get more and more active. They start actually if you're doing an attack mission, they might start counter-attacking. So things will start escalating. But you've got nothing telling you must finish now. The game will end now. Other than, obviously, if your squad gets wiped out and so on. So that is the fundamental difference between the three, is the way victory is determined at the end of the game. Or how you get to the end of the game. So with the upfront, you've got X amount of decks. With Warfighter, you've got to get to the objective card in X amount of time. And that's depending on how many other cards you've got to get through to get there. Whereas Ambush, the only one I say that uses a map, you have the freedom of sort of choosing the way you want to go and how you want to do it, other than the enemy are getting more alert as you progress. So of the three, okay, so I say Ambush has got a map. Which are more replayable? Now, I'm already sort of hinted that up front is infinitely more replayable than Warfighter. I do a mission on Warfighter. I don't really have any sort of like, oh, must do that one again. It's like, yeah, done that. Okay, what other missions have we got? And there are a finite amount of missions. Now, Ambush, one would think, well, you do mission 1, you've seen the program's instructions and such forth. There can't be much more to offer, can there? Well, they can, because when you've done mission 1 or mission 2 or whatever, there are 8 missions in the actual standard upfront box, Ambush box. And as you do each of those missions, you could do it a different way. If you travel south, you could, let's try it from the north. And mission 1, I've done a couple of times. And the other thing I've done it with is, it is designed as a solo game, but I have played it cooperatively. Me and my daughter have played it. I left her in charge of the squad, okay, in both sort of 2 teams. I did all the reading of the paragraphs and sort of show, what the Germans are doing and such forth, without her having to worry about going through the paragraph system. And so I went and saw it from a different point of view and perspective, and it played quite nicely. Now, I've been doing an Ambush campaign. I'm part way through. After I finish the 8 missions that are in the base box or core box, whichever way you want to word it, I'm going to do the next 4 in Move Out, and I'm thinking of adding them just on to the soldiers that survived the 8 missions, if any survive, from the first sort of campaign I'm doing. And there's a key word for you: campaign. Campaign, yes, Ambush, you can do a campaign. You've got your roster, you carry the squad through, and on you go. Up front, you can do a campaign. Now, I don't remember seeing anything for Warfighter as a campaign. Now, it does sound like I'm dissing Warfighter quite a bit. Yeah, I am. I don't really have any inclination to play it again. Why is that? Because it does get quite a lot of good reviews. Maybe I've been spoilt with Upfront and now Ambush, that I just have no inclination. I feel a bit cheated by the game. in that I've spent good money on the base game and on the extra cards, and every time I play it, it's just, yeah, it's all right. It never made me go, that was cool, that was exciting. Nah. And yeah, I know there's quite a lot. I mean, there's a Pacific core set. You've got to get another core set to actually then use the Pacific cards. I never felt inclined to do that, even though I do like the Pacific. I have upfront Pacific version. I have the ambush Pacific version. And I have no inclination to get the Warfighter. It's just hasn't done anything for me, the game. I've tried, I've played it enough times, probably about 15 times in total, give or take. And every time, meh. The cards are nice. It looks nice. It looks nice on the board, but it never feels like a complete game. If you're playing it solo, you could play two hands, which I found a bit clunky. You had your own little deck of cards, so you eventually sort of got a squad together. But they never felt any personal affinity for the guys, like I do in my ambush squad, which I've written their names down and their details and such forth. And in the ambush here, I'm now including Battle Hymn, which is the Pacific. I've now got a Pacific campaign going. In fact, I'm part way through until I ended up bedridden like this, a second mission of the Pacific campaign. And yeah, I have an affinity for my guys, you know. Each one, I mean, I lost in the first mission, I lost one of the Mexican guys, Gomez. He was taken out. I've got a replacement for him. He's the new guy. Alan, the squad leader, and they start generating their own little stories. Never got that with Warfighter. Up front, I say it's designed as a two-player game. The actual solo way of playing it, I've actually done 2 lots on my 2 separate games on my channel. It works. It's not great, but it works. And I still think the solo version of that is better than the solo version of Warfighter. However, it is ostensibly designed as a 2-player game, and as a 2-player game, it's unmatched. Absolutely unmatched. It's fantastic. Now, which one of the 3 would I take to a desert island? Depends if I had someone with me. Definitely wouldn't be Warfighter. If I had someone with me, it'd be up front. If I was playing solo, obviously it would be ambush, because that is designed as a solo game, can be played 2-player, whereas obviously up front is a 2-player that can be played solo. And Warfighter can be played with 4 players, maybe even more. I mean, I played it with all 4 players at a club, but it just doesn't hold together in my mind. I don't feel like I'm doing anything tactically interesting. I'm just playing cards to do something. In up front, I can save cards to eventually decide, right, okay, I'm going to cross this bit of open ground. I've got to play a move card. I know I've got to get a terrain card in my hand. Hopefully, maybe even smoke to give me a bit of smoke cover. So using my other guys to suppress the enemy so they can't actually fire back at me, etc., etc. And that all happens with the play of cards. And each nation's deck of cards or hand of cards is different in the way they use cards. So it definitely feels like, for example, the Germans have 5 cards in their hands. They can play any of these as actions on their groups and still discard a card to get more cards into their hand. The Americans, they can do actions on their groups, or they can discard 2 cards. They can't do both. Okay, so they can discard more than the Germans, so they can get a quicker turnover of cards to start the next plan, but they don't have that tactical flexibility to play cards and do discards. The Russians, they have only 4 cards in their hands, so tactical limitation, they can only do actions on their groups, or they could discard all 4, or up to all 4. So they can decide to let's scrap that plan, let's try something else, but they've still only got the limited choice of 4. then each of the other nations have a sort of variant of that, and have different ways of getting special ability. Like the British, they can fire better. They don't need as many fire strength to use a certain card. The Japanese, well, they only have, I think, 4 cards as well, but they could do 2 discards. I can't remember exactly. I haven't played the Japanese for a while, but they have special things that allow them to go banzai. They have the best morale, and their squad doesn't get broken as easily as the others. So the various nationalities are represented very nicely in up front. In ambush, well, you're ostensibly playing the Americans. There's no sort of, that is the main limitation on the game. Each of the missions you're playing each of the various nationalities against your American infantry in ambush, and against your American Marines in Battle Hymn, which is, I say, the Pacific version. So that is, if you're playing against Germans or you're playing against Japanese. So there is that limitation. But, so saying, the missions that are given, I would say they are replayable, as long as you go either a different route. But even then, it all depends on which guide you do certain things. The paragraph might read the same, but your condition number could be different. The what activates, did your guy pass the perception test and such forth to see what is visible from that hex? So again, different ways for that same mission, from that same paragraph or selection of paragraphs, to play out differently. So now, my favourite is still Up Front. Up Front is in my top 3 games of all time, without a doubt. I've played it against quite a few people. Going back to Randy, me and him played at least 20-25 scenarios. We occasionally dabble in it again. Now and again, me and him have played ASL and various other games, but we do sort of come back to Up Front. And each time it's thoroughly enjoyable. So, yeah. So that's it. Up Front is, to me, I know that a lot of people distract from it and say it's an okay game rather than a great game, but I can't find a flaw in it. Ambush, unfortunately, you're only playing the Americans, is to me the biggest flaw. But other than that, I thoroughly enjoy the game, and will continue to bring it to the channel because I want to go through each of the missions in there. So I'll be doing the playthroughs of that. Warfighter, I'm sorry, DBG. I feel like I've been ripped off by the game, and the sheer amount of components and cards and additional cards I've got to try and get a decent game out of it, and still, nah, I'm sorry. For all the people who love Warfighter, go and try Ambush. Go and try Up Front. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, so until next time, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Have I misplayed Warfighter? Have I missed something? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, if you could like the video, if you enjoyed what I'm sort of doing at the present moment while I am sort of convalescing and can't get to a gaming table or board, just let me know. And above all, play games. Have fun. Bye, Internet.